This is one of my absolute favorite Christmas stories. It's called Mr. Willowby's Christmas Tree, written and illustrated by Robert Barry. Do you see a problem right from the start? Yeah, Mr. Willowby has a Christmas tree, but it's way too tall. Mr. Willowby's Christmas Tree. Mr. Willowby's Christmas tree came by special delivery, full and fresh and glistening green, the biggest tree he had ever seen. He dashed downstairs to open the door. This was the moment he'd waited for. A magnificent tree, splendid, he cried. Please, sir, won't you carry it right inside? I think it might look best this year right in the parlor corner here. They're taking it in. It does look pretty large. But once the tree stood in its place, Mr. Willowby made a terrible face. The tree touched the ceiling, then bent like a bow. Oh, good heavens, he gasped. Something must go. Baxter, the butler, was called on in haste to chop off the top, though it seemed quite a waste. That's great, Mr. Willowby cried with glee. Now we can start to trim my tree. What does it mean to trim a tree? To decorate it, yeah. When the trimming was well underway, the top was placed on a silver tray. Baxter said, I know just who'd be delighted with this Christmas tree. So it was presented to Miss Adelaide, Mr. Willowby's upstairs maid. So they cut the top off, but because a tree is a triangle, if you cut the top off, you get a little triangle. So now they have a tiny tree. Won't this tree be a pretty sight when I have trimmed it later tonight? But the top, oh dear, I'm so afraid, will have to be cut, sighed Miss Adelaide. And so with scissors sharp and long, she snipped off the top while she hummed a song. The top was set out the very next day in back of the house to be thrown away. Are you noticing a pattern emerge? Yeah, Mr. Willowby's tree was too tall and he had to cut off the top. And where Miss Adelaide wants to put it, it's too tall, so she has to cut off the top. Do you think it's actually going to be thrown away? That little treetop caught the eye of Tim the gardener passing by. He certainly was not about to see that little tree thrown out. He hurried home straight away to see what Mrs. Tim would say. Fa-la-la, surprise, surprise! His wife could not believe her eyes. But our house, she said, is so snug and small. I do not believe we need it all. And before Tim had a chance to shout, she cut off the top and threw it out. What do you think is going to happen next? Barnaby Bear was padding by. It almost hit him in the eye. Now who would throw a tree away so very close to Christmas Day? I'll take it home. That's what I'll do. Look, Mama Bear, I've a present for you. So it's just the right size for those bears. Isn't it a pretty tree? yawned Barnaby quite drowsily. But Little Bear, standing off far, cried out, that tree won't hold a star. There's not enough room to put a star on top. What do you think they'll do? Barnaby said, let's cut a hunk off the bottom here at the trunk. Do you think they should cut it from the bottom? But Mama Bear just shook her head and sliced the treetop off instead. Getting tinier and tinier and tinier. Kind of like Russian nesting dolls. Those are dolls that have smaller versions inside of them. So we just keep getting another tree, just smaller and smaller and smaller. Jolly by golly, Barnaby said with a kick. Mama, that surely is just the right trick. Let's trim it with bells and honey rings, some berries and tinsel and popcorn on strings. Mama said, trim it just as you like. I've got to tidy up for the night. This top we won't need anymore. I'll put it just outside the door. Do you think that's the end of the tree story? Who sees it? A fox. Later on that frosty night, Frisky Fox came into sight. He spied the treetop, rubbed his chin, opened his sack, and stuffed the top in. He scampered home and jumped his gate. This Christmas present couldn't wait. It's even better than mincemeat pie, said Mrs. Fox with a happy sigh. Then the foxes saw that their Christmas prize was just a wee bit oversized. It keeps happening. There, my dears, don't you worry. I'll fix this top now in a hurry. Benjamin Rabbit found it then just outside the fox's den. It seems he thought most certainly, Santa left that for my family. Look, he cried, see the tree I found. With that he called his family around. Then there was a merrymaking, rollicking, frolicking, carrot-shaking celebration around the tree. All were as happy as rabbits can be. So the animals keep getting smaller and smaller. So the tree is just the right size for them. Even though the tree gets smaller, the animals get smaller. Is there an animal smaller than a rabbit that could use the top of this tree? Benjamin Rabbit with his own hand sliced a carrot and made a stand. Now let's see how this will look in our little chimney nook. Same problem. But right away the children cried, look, it's leaning off to one side. It's too tall, that's all, said Mrs. Rabbit, and as though it were a summer carrot, she gave it a chop and threw away the top. So did you have an animal in mind that might find that top? Who found it? A little mouse. Then Mistletoe Mouse just happened to see that tiny tip of a Christmas tree. He pulled it through the snow and ice, up some stairs. He fell down twice. For him, it's big. At last he reached his cozy house. It's just the right size, said Mrs. Mouse. Then at the top, if you please, they put a star made out of cheese. So it was the perfect size for them. It wasn't too big. They had room for a star. Oh, wasn't it grand to have a tree exactly like Mr. Willowby? So there's Mr. Willowby next to his tree, and if we zoom in, there are the mice enjoying their tree. But their tree is actually the exact same, right? It's just the very tip top. And the reason why I like this Christmas story so much is because so many families benefit from this one tree. So I love how it just brings so much Christmas joy to so many. Mr. Willowby's Christmas tree.